What's up and good morning, guys? Welcome back to another video. I guess we finally got that rainy day that they've been talking about, which makes this an ideal day to work on the project that we've got sitting right there. So from my recent videos, you guys saw when we installed the pallet rack in the shop over here, and one of the main reasons I wanted this pallet rack was to get all this giant stack of tires and wheels and tires that I own up off the ground, out of the way, and then that way we have more room to store a bunch of other stuff. So we got the rack all built, set up, installed, and then I started looking at this pile of tires and I was like, man, I hate moving tires. You know, the stock OBS wheels and tires, not super heavy, not that bad. But as you get into like the newer style, like the Tahoe wheels and tires there, or even the tires and wheels off of my Denali, like those are no fun. They're heavy, they suck to lift up that high. And I also want to be able to put up there my flex ramp as well as the base plate for it. Like, got a lot of stuff that I want to go up pretty high on the pallet rack. And lifting that stuff is no fun, and being that everybody's in quarantine right now, like I'm pretty much flying solo over at the warehouse, so that's why this pile of tires has just been kind of sitting here. But one of the things I've always done growing up, working in construction, whatever it may be, is I've always looked for a tool to make said job easier. You know, when I was younger, I didn't have access to a lot of tools, and I used to cut wood with a Dremel. Like, you know, you gotta work with what you got. And I didn't have a nice big old circ saw or something, you know, just playing in the garage at like 12, 13 years old. I found a Dremel. I'm like, yeah, I'll make this work. So as I got older and I got a little bit of money and I was able to purchase newer tools to make things easier and faster, because we all know time is money, and the quicker you can do something, the more money you can make, typically. I decided, well, there's no difference in going about getting those tires up on that pallet rack. Now cue these purchases we've got right here. Now ideally, I would buy a forklift, but currently, forklift prices are more than I want to spend. We don't have a whole lot of room to store a forklift, and we wouldn't use a forklift that often. So if you factor in, let's say around here, to get like a halfway decent used forklift, like, and by halfway decent, I mean like it runs, is like $3,000 is basically what you're looking at. Or instead of $3,000, I'm sitting over here staring at about $250 worth of parts from Harbor Freight. Now I know you're saying, Harbor Freight, what are you doing? Well, trust me, for the little bit that I'm gonna use what we're building, it was Harbor Freight budget friendly. So first up, we've got the pickup truck crane with cable winch, half-ton capacity. And obviously, this booger is meant to be mounted to the bed of your truck. It's got a hand crank winch on it and a little hydraulic jack in there, basically a little bottle jack to, I would assume, raise the boom up on the crane itself to be able to pivot or lift things a little bit higher. But obviously, we're not mounting it to the bed of the truck. My plan is we're gonna mount it up to the top of the pallet rack. Hopefully, ideally. Might be crazy, might not work, I don't know. And since we're gonna be using it up on the top of the pallet rack, the hand crank, well, you know, not the worst thing in the world if it's in the bed of your truck. Like, you don't want to have to jump down, strap a tire up, jump up, hand crank it, move it over, re-hand crank it all the way back down. Like, that's just not how we roll around here. I'm a fan of a power version. So we've also got the Pittsburgh remote control electric hoist, which I plan on. Now, you know, we don't know if it's gonna work yet. I haven't tried any of this. If you notice, the boom on the truck crane right here has this second section in the middle that extends out. I'm hoping, we don't know if it's gonna work, that that's about the same dimensional tube as whatever's in that picture, and we could just mount the hoist onto the end of the crane. Yeah, I literally built this in my head off of a couple of pictures on Harbor Freight's website, just being like, yeah, that looks like that. Hey, let's find out if that's even close to real. We'll open up the crane box here, which is a lot heavier than I thought. This thing weighs about 100 pounds with all the accessories here. Some of which I don't know if necessarily gonna be going on there, like the cable winch. No need, well, all right, it's kind of already attached. One box here. Looks like it's got the hydraulic jack in it, or I guess when you put a bottle jack on a crane, it becomes a hydraulic ram. All right, I'll get the crane base here, which is a lot bigger than I thought it was gonna be based on the Harbor Freight pictures. Big swivel head on it. Got the boom arm here. Oh, jeez. Which goes just like so. And then we've got some miscellaneous angle iron. Got all of our hardware in this box. Well, thankfully it's standing up on its own right now. I think if I put the inner boom portion in there, it's not really gonna wanna stand up. So I'm gonna leave all that out, which will actually make it easier to lift up there anyways. Check out these super trick little weight ratings they put on there. That is beautiful. What do you guys think they use? That's some like, oh, well, no, I'm gonna guess it's not Krylon. But since we're talking about weight ratings, let's discuss. This thing is rated at 1,000 pounds. Now, obviously that's 1,000 pounds with that boom arm all the way in. The further you start to extend that leverage point out, the less weight you can handle. And the furthest point out is 500 pounds. Now coming over to our electric hoist, I got the 440 pound double line capacity electric hoist. There are much stronger options from Harbor Freight. I don't ever anticipate lifting anything even remotely that heavy. I mean, I don't know what a set of 40s weighs, but I know we're not anywhere near 400 pounds. So for what we're gonna be lifting up there, I wouldn't wanna put anything too crazy and heavy up there anyways. This is like the right size capacity. We didn't spend a ton of money. Like I said, we're sticking within a Harbor Freight budget here. Now, one thing I haven't really figured out is how exactly I'm going to mount this up onto the pallet rack there. Obviously the pallet rack rails aren't very thick. I think they're plenty strong, but the base plate's about that wide. And I don't know if we're actually going to be able to like grab that with the bolt hole pattern that is on there. One thing I was thinking about is like stacking up some 2x and like sandwiching something together and being able to mount it. I'm thinking about mounting it in the back corner of the pallet rack, obviously being like tip wise, it's gonna wanna tip this way. I'm also going to be redheading the pallet rack down into the concrete. That way we will eliminate any issue of this thing wanting to tip over. It'll be fully anchored into the concrete on all 4 posts. Now I did see that it comes with these pieces of angle iron, which I didn't really know what they were for in the beginning. But turns out from the instructions there, these are actually meant to sandwich the frame rails on your truck bed. We'll pretend right now that that black piece is your truck frame, and it goes on either side of that. You drill your own holes to go through your truck frame. These might actually work to our benefit of being able to give us that thickness that we're going for on the pallet rack itself. Yeah, we got a little bit of thinking to do right now. So I think I figured out my solution, guys. The space needed in between these 2 rails, which would essentially, I guess, be your frame rail on your truck, is 2 1/4. And obviously the rails here on the pallet rack are not 2 1/4. So what I've done is I've ripped down a piece of basically 5/8. We need really a 1/2 inch, but I decided to go a little bit thicker. That way when it sandwiches the wood, it'll squish down to probably the exact 1/2 inch that we need. That'll go right like that, and we should be able to bolt through both of those with the pieces of angle iron over here and give us our sturdy mounting platform. I've gone ahead and got everything clamped into place here before I realized that I made a big mistake. Yeah, I totally put the pre-drilled holes as if they were going to be tying into each other, but they don't. The pre-drilled holes should be on this axis because those are what bolts into the actual base of the crane over there. So now I get to pull this off and reclamp it. And let me tell you, this is not fun to try and clamp by yourself. You may also notice that I'm doing it in the front here, whereas I mentioned earlier I was gonna be doing it in the back for like counterweight, leverage, I don't know the technical engineering term of this thing not wanting to tip over. But for ease of attaching it right now, it's gonna go on the front. Worst case scenario, I'll put this part of the rack in the back corner over there, which I actually think will be better to have the crane like in that back corner versus up here in the front. And I could just pull all of this off and do it on the ground, but I think it's actually gonna be easier once everything's clamped in place to do it up here. But it doesn't all fall off. Loosen the clamp a little bit, everybody stay good, cool. See? All right, that was a lot easier than the last 10 times. And we're using just the base. We're gonna leave the rest of the assembly down there. Just make sure our holes all line up, we got our spacing correct. I think in the effort of trying to keep everything in line to make sure all of these holes do line up, I'm actually gonna bolt this together before I go ahead and mark my holes and drill it through. So hopefully everything stays up where it's supposed to be. They do include hardware to bolt the crane base to the angle arm. So I'm hoping we've got sufficient hardware over here. I don't really know. This stuff all looks pretty small. But between all the projects we've been working on in the shop here, there is probably enough significant bolts that will work and get us through. Because really I'm trying to avoid having to go to any hardware store in any way, shape, or form, you know, stay in quarantine. Today is all about working with what we got. So I've already pre-drilled a little hole right there, marking the 2 spots that I'm gonna be going through. I really hope this works. My original plan was I was gonna span a piece of lumber in between the 2 horizontals here, and then basically be able to easily bolt the crane to that. But again, being that I don't wanna go to any store to get lumber, I'm just going straight into this. You know, I am concerned. I'm relying very heavily on that weld right there, as well as whatever weld is holding this piece or boxing this piece in and then sealing that seam right there. I don't really know if this is gonna work. Worst case scenario, we take it apart and then we end up with my original idea of spanning it with some lumber, but. So far drilling is going somewhat decent considering all the drill bits in the shop are completely dull, so put that on the list. Buy a good quality set of steel drill bits. Luckily, we've got the step bit here that is really helping to chew away at the metal. The only issue being with this side right here, having the wood in between. Over there, I'm not able to get the step bit all the way in, so we're gonna loosen up the entire crane mount right now, slide it over a little bit, finish drilling those holes through, and then we should be ready to bolt it up. Is it concerning how easily that step bit went through the actual pallet wrap material? A little bit. Listen, there's a whole lot of Bush League engineering going on here, so if it fails, it fails. Don't stand underneath it. Here's to hoping the bolts fit. I've loosened everything up just to give it a little bit more play while everything gets lined up. Well, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. I'm very thankful that those holes lined up considering I had to drill them from opposing sides, but got the bolts in, tighten those boogers down. All right, she is all bolted on, which is good because every time I jump off, I expect the thing to like come flying and smack me in the head. And I gotta say, like so far, she's pretty solid. Again, obviously the rack's not bolted to the ground. And once I get plywood in here, that actually like stiffen everything up. Now the next step is going to kind of be make or break for this whole project because we don't really know if the electric hoist actually fits onto the extended part of the boom, which slides into there. Maybe let's just put that up right now actually. Hopefully this isn't too much weight that tips everything over. All right, I'm second guessing a little bit of this design. Like, I don't know if I would comfortably hang up the end of this right now. But I mean, it's got great range of motion. I don't know. We're gonna keep chugging along. If it fails, well then, hopefully it makes a good video either way. One of the options that was on my mind when I was looking at setting this whole thing up was replacing that reel with just like a 12-volt winch off of like a small one off an ATV or something like that. But I didn't want to have to deal with figuring out how to wire it up to a 120-volt socket because obviously I'm not hooking batteries up to it or anything like that. So the good thing about the electric hoist here is that it is actually a 120 plug. We see that we've got these mounting brackets. Now, this needs to fit on that. Hedge your bets right now. Think it's gonna work? Let's pull this whole thing out first so we can see all the little pieces. We've got our nice remote there. Looks a lot different than I thought it was gonna look. So what a lot of people use these for is if you have like an attic access in your garage and you wanna hoist things up into your attic, this makes a great tool for that. Or if you wanna lift tires onto your pallet rack. See, we got our smaller boom piece. Let's take one of these brackets and, oh, it is so close. Pretty sure I could hammer that on. It's gonna spread it a little bit, but they've got oblong holes on the actual mounting bracket, so there might be enough space because these bolt into the top of the actual hoist itself. I don't know, it's looking already pretty close. I don't know, maybe spreading it just enough might work. This would be a good time for the plasma cutter. Unfortunately, it's over at Sergio's shop, but we could totally, if we had the raw material, make our own little brackets like that, bend them, and get the exact measurements and make it work. But again, the theme of the day is work with what you got. So we're gonna work with what we got, and that is a hammer. So I went ahead and gave it the old college try here with the hammer, and it started spreading out too much, so I rebent it. And I wish they gave me longer bolts that would actually just grab in, because then I could just suck them down evenly, and it would keep it from spreading like crazy, and it would just go as far as it wanted to go. Let me see if I got long enough bolts over here to make that happen. So I finally found the right size bolts that are a little bit longer, hopefully long enough to just start to bite there, which I think we're gonna be okay. So we're gonna have to try to elongate this just a little bit more. Currently, I can't get the bolt over far enough to go in straight, and I don't wanna cross thread it and have it go in at an angle. So I'm gonna take a little bit out right there, probably with the Dremel, and let's see what we can do. Well, not the prettiest work, but considering I don't have my entire Dremel set here, all I have is the cutoff discs, I think it turned out pretty good. Now the moment of truth, is it gonna work? Hammer action. Already looking way better. Bolts going in somewhat straight, maybe, kinda. Little powder coating in the way, but I think we'll get it. And now let's see if it'll actually suck it down and tighten up good. I'm actually quite impressed with that. Is it perfect? No. Is it a lot better than I thought it was gonna be? Absolutely. Like it ended up kind of form-fitting to the actual boom arm itself. I think I'm gonna pull these back out, put some bigger washers, obviously throw some lock washers on there, and we'll be good to go. Now, unfortunately, this is as far as I'm gonna get today. I've just run out of time to be here, but it ends up working out because I really don't even want to put the weight of that thing up there until I anchor that rack to the ground, which means fortunately, we're gonna have to make a trip to Home Depot, which I've tried to avoid. So as always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you have not subscribed already, please click the subscribe button now that you do not miss out on whether this catastrophe is either a catastrophe or it works. Don't forget to give this video a like and give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to check out workfortapparel.com because if there's anything you want in this life, you gotta be willing to work for it. You guys are the best. I'm out.
Damn. Yeah.